Hey guys, it's Shaylin Marie, and I am back with a speed build. So, like many other people who love building in The Sims 4, I have been obsessed with the Tiny Living stuff pack that just came out. So, with this particular speed build, I challenged myself to build a micro home. Now, I am not, and I cannot stress this enough, I am not a tiny home builder. It's not the kind of build I typically go for. I tend to build pretty medium-sized homes, typically family-style homes. So this is definitely out of my wheelhouse and not necessarily a build that I am super comfortable doing. So I really kind of enjoyed challenging myself, and I have to say that the Tiny Living Stuff Pack is hands down one of my favorites in the entire game. And I can't believe I'm saying that because it wasn't necessarily something that I found myself ever thinking like, oh, I really wish that we had stuff for tiny living. Like, that's just not something that I ever wished for. But now that we have it, I am obsessed. I love the aesthetics of all of the build and buy items that we got. I think that they are beautiful and the color swatches are phenomenal. Per usual, I do wish that we had a few more color swatches, but the colors that they chose, I think, are clean and modern and just absolutely gorgeous. So I know that a ton of people who do these builds and who have been playing with the Tiny Living pack have been doing these like 1x1 or 2x1 bathrooms. I played with so many different versions. I end up just doing, especially when I just do like a small home or a tiny home or a micro home such as this one, I just leave the bathroom open. Maybe that makes other people uncomfortable. I am unfazed by it. So that's just what I've been doing. And then I put a curtain over and just sort of pretend like the Sims are going to close the curtain if they go in to use the bathroom while someone else is there. Now, obviously, I realize that the curtain is not sound blocking. So if a Sim was weirded out by the idea of someone hearing them use the facilities, that's not really ideal. But obviously, for the sake of space, it's the perfect solution for these kinds of builds. So it does kind of look like that curtain is floating in midair, but that's just how it is. I do not gravitate towards blues. I gravitate toward teal. I like tans. I like reds. I like purples. Not a huge pink person. And so these colors really pushed me to not just use the color swatches that were available and actually find that I enjoyed them, but to also find other pieces in the game that sort of go with or complement these particular things. So I found myself using a lot of colors that I don't necessarily know that I would have previously, but I'm really enjoying using these new color swatches. I just think it's really fun. With Tiny Living, I find that I tend to utilize shelving a lot more than things like cabinets. And I think that's just because I really like the idea of open concept shelving. I have had it in homes that I have lived in. I think it can look very messy and it can sort of get out of hand. But when done well, I just think it's beautiful, and I don't see the point in hiding away things that people typically use on a day-to-day basis. I just don't. Like cereal. Like, yeah, people eat cereal, so why not just leave the cereal out where everyone can see it and find it easily? So yeah, I definitely tend to just use that open concept shelving in my games as well. I think it's really realistic for Tiny Living. I think that people would use shelves quite often. And I also just love the idea of sort of the clutter items that end up there. I have found the easiest way to put things on these shelves if they don't automatically gravitate toward the shelves and stick to it, to remove the countertop beneath it so it doesn't try to lock onto that, and then lift up the items. And I just kind of did that with everything that I could think of. The little spice racks, some pictures, a gardening basket, a little canister that would hold pens and pencils and scissors and things like that. Because I would imagine that in tiny living, that you sort of just need everything on hand, and you're never really going to have anything extraneous. So you're going to have all these things that you would use, and to have them out would be the easiest thing. So it's sort of my mentality when I'm using these builds, is to just try to put things there that I think seem really useful, and things that would actually be found in a tiny home. I did toy around with the idea of putting this shelf lifted up, and I would probably utilize that in another build. When I really got looking at the aesthetics of the shelf, it didn't really go with the vibe in this tiny house or in this micro house. So I just sort of gave up on it and ended up taking it out later, because it just looks really sort of traditional country versus really modern and sort of like, that shelf actually that I just placed. So I do end up also using the small fridges, like the dorm fridges, in these games as well. Now I realize that if you don't have the Discover University pack, that's not helpful, but I just think that using those fridges allows there to be a microwave in there, and then I can also stack things up on top like shelving, or I can put decorative items like this little organizer area, things that would make the house look really homey and cozy, without sort of looking crazy. Now, this is really where I start to embrace that idea of the blue and really trying to pull that teal from the couch into the backsplash in the kitchen. I just think it's really, really pretty. And I end up going with this red sofa because I thought that it complemented the blue really nicely and still goes with that teal that we have, which is just so funny because I definitely used that blue from the sofa, or that teal from the sofa, as like a jumping off point for the rest of the house, and then I totally changed the color. But I just love this burnt orange red color. I think it's so beautiful, and it's definitely a color that I would use in real life in a home. The style of this whole micro home ends up being like very much my aesthetic, which I definitely did not set out to do, but I think it's just kind of inevitable. You'll see me shuffling things around so many times here, just trying to make sure that they have all the things that they need, and also things that like look useful and look like things that they would actually utilize, and not trying to put a bunch of like extraneous things, but also making sure that there are enough skill building items on the lot as well. I will say that is one of the larger challenges in these tiny homes, I think, is making sure that you get skill building items. So a few minutes ago, I just placed those plants, and I actually took the idea of sizing those up from Delicacy, who has been sizing those up, and I totally agree with her thought that they look better sized up. I think they're adorable when they're tiny, but placing them most often, I find that I need them to be larger in order to sort of fill the space in the way that I am looking for them to do. So I often size them up. So shout out to her for that particular building tip, because it's definitely helped. So here you just see me searching for some more little clutter items. These plants from Discover University are everything. In real life, I would totally have those, except that I cannot keep plants alive. I make myself feel better by saying that I can at least keep a human alive, because I do have a child. So I can keep a human alive, but I am incapable of keeping plants alive. I can't do it. All right, so just adding some landscaping here. I definitely didn't give myself any sort of money limit. There's no financial limit for the building. I know other people were giving themselves limits. I didn't. I really wanted to build sort of the ideal micro home, and I felt like giving myself this challenge of building a micro home was challenge enough for the day. So I'm just adding these rocks here to sort of create a border around the landscaping that I've done to make it look a little bit more penned in, a little bit more strategic. Realized the Murphy bed was sticking out of the back of the house, so I fixed that. And then just putting a roof here, just trying to keep it really clean and modern. I do think, I end up building this up a little bit and then putting some plants in there just to add a little bit more greenery to the outside of the home because I love the way that looks. In reality, I have no idea how that would ever work. I don't get it. But in builds, I just think it's gorgeous to do it that way. So then it takes me a little bit to try to find a color, but I end up going with this really gorgeous like steel blue that I am now obsessed with and I'm now using in all of my builds that I'm doing off camera. And I've been playing with this one family for a bit, and they have moved houses like 3 times as their family has grown. And I keep choosing this blue siding. So every house that they've had has this blue siding because I'm just obsessed with it. So, yep, this is kind of it. This is sort of the end where I start putting in a flooring and trying to decide if I want to go with a worm or a ashy tone floor. I'm super thrilled with the way that this came out. I love it. So thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Thanks.